So the topic of the presentation today is responsibility. It's a complicated topic because few of us have experienced or understood what our true responsibilities are. And the responsibilities change with time. So from the day we are born till the day we die, our responsibilities are not the same. And the more we are aligned with our responsibilities, the more happier we feel in life. And the more we are misaligned with our responsibilities, the more unhappy we feel. And why is this so important that we align with our responsibilities in a very conscious and a continuous way? Because every single one of us has come on this planet to execute something that we have come here for. So if you take any living being, or for that matter, living or non-living, they have a purpose. A plant or a tree has a purpose. It has come here to do a certain job. It breathes in carbon dioxide and gives in oxygen so that it can survive and it can help the humans survive, and humans and other living things survive. Now imagine if one day the plants say, oh, I'm not sure what my purpose in life is, so I'm going to stop doing what I do, or what I'm trained to do, what I'm designed to do. Not only the plant will die, but the human race will die. So that shows how critical it is for us to know and to align consciously what we are here for. And we are designed to do a specific task at a given point in time. However, because we are human beings and we have a lot of confusions and programmings, we tend to not be clear and get very easily sidetracked from our true purpose at a given point in time. So let me give you a very simple, I don't have too many slides today, but let me give you a few simple examples. And I'll start that with giving an example of the human journey. The human journey, sorry, one second. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. So the human journey starts at inception inside the mother's womb. Now, if you take this example, that how the child's responsibility or the mother's responsibility, we need to take both sides of the equation, the child's responsibility and the mother's responsibility. So if you take the child's responsibility, here the responsibility of the child is not aware at this time, but the child's responsibility is to just take the nourishment from the mother and grow. That's all its purpose is. That's all its job is at this time. And the mother's responsibility is to take care of herself, because the child is dependent on her well-being. So if the mother is not taking care of herself, she's not fulfilling her responsibility. This is the universe given responsibility to the mother. So if the mother is taking drugs and smoking cigarettes and doing whatever else she's addicted to possibly, then in some form, then she is not executing on her responsibility. So she is sidetracked from her core responsibility at this time. Yeah, of course, we need to forgive the mother if she has got some addictions and stuff, but at the same time, for her to become aware of her responsibility at a given time, is very, very important for her well-being and for her child's well-being. Now, once the baby takes birth, there's a dramatic change in responsibilities, right? In the womb, the child is not even responsible for breathing on his own. The child is getting the nourishment, including oxygen, from the mother's bloodstream. So it is not the child's responsibility to even breathe during that time. All the energy is being spent by the child in growing and building its own cellular structure, the body structure, the cellular structure, the bone structure, with the support from the mother, of course. But once the child takes birth, all of a sudden, the responsibility of breathing is now with the child. The child is now responsible for breathing on its own. It cannot depend on the mother to breathe anymore. And the mother's responsibility has also dramatically changed. Now it's no longer just, so of course, if she's feeding and stuff, so she has to take care of her body in the same way as before, but she's not feeding the baby in the way she was feeding before. She now has a very different connection with the child. It's not through the umbilical cord anymore. It's more physical, as the child being an independent entity from her own self. Earlier, the baby was so dependent and so connected with her body that it was almost inseparable from her. Now the baby is separate entity. So a completely new connection is, a disconnection happens, then a completely new connection happens. And this disconnection and reconnection are both critical for feeling good and better. There's a new level of joy that forms when the disconnection happens and the reconnection happens. Just for a second, imagine as an analogy, if the disconnection doesn't happen for whatever reasons, whether the baby doesn't want to take birth or whether the mother doesn't want the baby to go or leave the body. And again, this is just a simple analogy. What will happen if the disconnection doesn't happen? The disconnection from the womb to a separate entity, if that does not happen for whatever reason, both the mother and the baby will die. As you know, medically, if the baby is not born within a week of its time when it's supposed to be born, the toxicity in the body of the mother increases dramatically, and in less than 24 hours to 48 hours, the baby will die and the mother will die. So this shows how critical it is to disconnect and then to reconnect. And look at the joy now. Once the disconnection and the reconnection happens, look at the joy for both the mother and the baby. And look at the pain and the suffering to a point of death if that disconnection and the disconnection does not happen. Now, if you take the life journey of any human being from the baby to an old age, every step of the way, we are designed to disconnect and reconnect with our own self and with the environment and the people around us. So when this baby is 2 months old, let's say, the mother is given the responsibility and the energy to support the child in the ways that is natural for both the child and the mother. The mother is feeding the baby, mother is changing the baby, mother is holding the baby 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no gaps, there's no rests. And the mother is given the energy and the joy to do that work. She is given that energy by the universe to execute on her responsibility. And this is very important to note, that the universe provides you with the energy to execute on your current responsibilities, the correct responsibilities. So at that time, the mother is 24/7 on the job, and she is effortlessly, tirelessly doing her job. Now imagine the same child is now 20 years old. And if the mother tries to do the same things, the same responsibilities that she was when the baby was 2 months old, it won't make any sense. And she will not even have the energy to do it. In fact, if she tries to do that kind of stuff, both the baby and the mother and the mother will have face serious consequences to that. The child will not learn to take on its own responsibilities, which are the universe given responsibility for this child when the child is 20 years old, to take care of its own self, to feed its own self, to take care of its own bodily functions, to go earn a living, do its own things. That's how we are designed. But if the mother is sheltering the baby, the child, when the child is 20 years old, then there's something fundamentally wrong with that picture, and both the mother and the child will suffer in that. The universe will not give you the energy or the support to do things that are not aligned with your current responsibilities. So as we grow, we become more and more independent from the parents. And that is how nature has designed us to be. The older we become, the more independent, the more self-thinking, self taking care of our own self becomes our part of our responsibility. And I see so many cases where parents come and ask me, oh my gosh, my son is undisciplined, is not taking care of himself, has gotten into drugs, doing all kinds of wrong things. What should I do? And my answer all the time to these parents is that you need to allow the child, your son or your daughter, to become more independent, to take care of their own self, to take care of their own needs, which they did not learn while growing up. And it's never too late. Start now. And this is a relearning for both the parent and the child. It's not just one-sided. The parents, due to their insecurities, sometimes they do not allow the child to grow up independently, because there's fear. If the child becomes independent, then I'll lose the support that I have from the child. What will I do when I become older? And so this kind of holding on to the responsibilities that when things were different, and we don't allow ourselves to grow and change as we grow with time, as time goes by, is a very serious problem. It can become a very serious problem. It will have health consequences. It will have financial consequences. It will have consequences at every level of our being. Because we don't have the energy or the support from the universe anymore to do things that are incorrect for us at a given time. And it's going to hurt us, and it's going to hurt the people on the other side of the equation. And this is very common, very common, more common than you can imagine, because we never learned these principles that disconnection and reconnection are absolutely critical for our growth process. The child is, in many cases, and I've struggled with this for many years, the child is unsafe safe and doesn't feel safe or secure, and so the child doesn't feel it safe to leave the parent. And in many cases, and in my own case as well, I held on a lot of anger and resentment towards my mother, whereas the issue was that I was not feeling safe enough to leave my mother. And that anger and frustration or whatever I was holding towards my mother was actually a symbol of me not feeling safe to leave the mother. So that was a form, the anger and resentment and whatever else emotions were a way for me to have that connection with my mother. The emotion became negative because I was holding on to something. I was not willing to take fully and 100% take my responsibility for my life. And that's why it became toxic. And the more I started to become and take full responsibility for my life, my physical, my financial, my emotional well-being, the less I became dependent on her, and the less I became angry at her. So in many, and the same case for on the other side, even though my mother was not willing to let go of me, and that was part of the problem, that both sides need to be willing to let go, to disconnect, and then reconnect at a different level. Disconnection doesn't mean that we have to completely let go of the other person, and that may be the case in some situations. But in most cases, the disconnection and the reconnection happen almost simultaneously. So we first disconnect from the way we were connecting before, and we realize that the life has changed, things have changed, we have reached a different milestone, we have become adults or whatever the new situation is, the new milestone is, and we are supposed to take care of ourselves now. And then we reconnect at a different level. So this is at a very broad level how we are supposed to become aware of our responsibilities at a basic human level. Then once we become adults, we are now responsible for things more than just our family. So we have like now a career, we have a job, we have a different life purpose now than just to take care of our own individual family. And that certainly may be part of the equation, the part of the equation being to take care of our family, which is normal and natural. However, there is more than that that starts coming into play. So if let's say you're doing a job, then you're not just responsible for your family internally, which is certainly you're responsible to bring in the money or in whatever ways you need to support the family. But now you're also responsible towards your job. Whatever that job is, whatever that life purpose is. We are now not just limited to the family like we were when we were children. Now we have a broader scope in life. To become more aware of that broader scope is extremely important. Because if we are not aware of that broader scope of our beingness, then we will find ourselves very constricted and restricted into that little box that we came in initially. So like when the baby is in the womb, it's a very small environment, right? And that's the environment that the baby needed to grow and become bigger and stronger. But when the birth takes place, now the world is open to this person. So that disconnection helps us get into a bigger and better environment where we can expand and grow more. So if we are not allowing ourselves to disconnect, then we will remain constricted in that small box. And that is the purpose, that is the understanding and the purpose of changing of responsibility. That we are moving from a constricted and smaller space and smaller environment into a much bigger environment. So if, let's say, the case I hear from many parents is that my son is not doing his job and he is still at home and he's doing drugs or whatever else, is because the person, the child, is not willing to go off on its own and expand its horizons, to see the world as a much bigger place than the parental house or the parental environment, because that was a safe environment for the child to grow up. But when the child has grown to that point where the child can launch on its own, it needs to leave. I'm not saying as a rule, but in most cases, the child needs to leave the family house and go off on its own, make its own living, and see the world as a place where it can establish its own identity. And if mentally or physically, now remember, the child may actually leave the family home, but emotionally, the child may still be stuck in that phase. That is also very common. So it's very important for the child to fully launch on its own, both emotionally and physically, and start to see the world as a place where it's establishing its own identity, its own purpose, its own meaning, without dependence on the parents. And even if there is some dependence, then you need to create a plan of how to come out of the dependence, because your own identity is critical to be established. Who are you? You're not, so along each of these stages of development, there is an identity change as well, which is very important to note. You're not a baby anymore inside the womb. Now you're an independent self. So I am now independent is your sort of your mantra. And then you go from stage to stage, where from dependence to more and more independence. And what is independence? Independence is establishing your own identity. That is independence. Right? Initially, your identity was, I'm a child of this person. And then when you become independent emotionally, physically, mentally, you have an independent identity. Okay, I am this now. I'm not a child of this, although that can still be there, but I'm an independent entity. I'm an independent self. I'm a person of my own. You're establishing your full identity and expressing your identity in the world. And that identity shift is extremely important from a consciousness standpoint. So physically, you may have you started separating, but if your identity hasn't shifted into your own self, then that's a problem. And it changes over time. So in my case, for example, as I was growing up, I picked up the identity of my father. He was an engineer, so I became an engineer. And that identity served me a lot, and I really enjoyed that. And I worked at Motorola for 16 years, where I was an engineer. I did my engineering work, and it was very helpful and healing for me. First several years, I really enjoyed the work. But then slowly I started finding that I'm not enjoying the work anymore. And that should have been a signal for me that my identity needs to change, although I didn't know what to change into. But That should have been a signal to me. I wasn't educated that much at that time. But that was a signal to me that my identity is ready for a transformation, that I need to go on to a higher level of consciousness of doing what I really have come here to do. And it should have started a chain of thinking in my mind. What am I here for? What do I want to do? And that transition phrase was very important for me, although I hung on to that previous identity for long enough. And thank God for the universe to help me there. My company shut down, my division shut down, I was laid off. And thank God for that I was laid off. Otherwise, I was like so comfortable in my previous identity. I was making good money. I was doing everything. I was enjoying my life there from a money standpoint. Although I was not happy in my work, but I was still having a comfortable life. And I didn't want to leave that. I was scared of leaving that. So that fear is natural. It's understandable. Right? Anytime there's a transition change, there's a phase change in our life, there's an identity shift, there's fear involved. That's normal. That's natural. When the baby is taking birth from the womb and coming into an independent self, there's tremendous fear that the child goes through. That's why most children are born crying. Because they're afraid, or to some degree, they're going through a dramatic change in life. And that is what happens when we grow up as well. When we are making a shift, a radical shift in life, it is scary. It's uncomfortable, but a shift that is absolutely necessary for our growth. And the more we align with that shift and the change, the more happier we become, the more we expand and bigger and become more freer in our living. So going back to the case of my Motorola example, when I was laid off, believe it or not, I was like grinning ear to ear because I was so happy. And everybody else was saying, oh my God, why are you so happy? Because I felt this was a very necessary change for me. Even though for the next 2-3 years, I didn't know what I was going to do. I struggled, but I still was supported by the universe. I was taken care in every which way. And I took the time to make a transition into the healing world. What a radical change from engineering to healing. But that's where I felt called to. That's where I started saying, this is where my next life and next phase of my life would take me. And there were many, many, many challenges, but still that was necessary for my growth. And I'm truly grateful for that transition and that shift that I went through. And this is the journey of life. We constantly disconnect and reconnect with something better, something higher, in a very conscious way. That's the key word. Do it consciously. Okay, very good. So that is the end of my presentation. I just wanted to bring this idea up that this is something that is super important in life. And if you are struggling with lack of energy or any other issues in life, it's time to see where do you need to disconnect and where do you need to reconnect. So just keep in mind that if something is not working for you, there is some disconnection needs to happen, whether it's at a consciousness level, whether it's a physical level. There's something that the universe is telling you, okay, you need to move from here, change into a better place. Better place meaning physically, emotionally, mentally, consciousness wise, you need to take the next step in life. And it's something that you have to control, that you have to take conscious choices, make conscious choices to move forward. Okay, very good. So I will leave it up to you guys here. If you have any questions, you can always raise your hand or actually just unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself. And I can, if you have any specific issues in your life that you want guidance on, I can help you with that, or any other questions you may have, or any comments you may have, or any examples you may have in from your own life, how you have accomplished disconnection and reconnection and how it improved your life. That would be very helpful as well. Any examples from your own life would be very useful. Just like I gave the example of my case with Motorola, how happy I became afterwards, although there were challenges. So if you have any examples like that to share, that would be very useful too. You can raise your hand as well. Okay. Hey, Terry.
Hey, Sanjay.
Hey, Terry. How are you?
I'm good.
You got any comment?
I just wanted to share, yes, just comments. I really appreciate, I always get something at some level when I listen to your seminar, so I'm very thankful for that. And I also appreciate when other people share their experiences because that helps also. So I have been using all these techniques and examples that you've given, and it has helped me. I am physically separated from my father, and I made that conscious decision again in my life, but this time I am sticking to it, and it has enabled me and given me this time to find out what I need to do to heal myself. And it's working, albeit sometimes not as quickly as I would like to personally like, but that's okay too. And I'm just very thankful for that advice. And it's not an easy thing to do. I can say that up front because all of our natural tendencies and upbringing are, to love and honor your family and your parents, which I do on the spiritual level. For me personally, though, to heal myself of physical and emotional issues, it is the way for me. And
Right.
that's all I can speak for.
Perfect, Terry. Perfect. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the sometimes what happens is, if I may say something a little bit on your behalf without any details, but what happens is that even though we go through life, we have separated emotionally, physically, mentally, but the deeper levels of our being hasn't really adjusted to our new identity, and that they come to hound us at later point in life, meaning that we have adjusted to a new life, but at an emotional level we are still not completely become our own self. And that's where I think the next phase of growth is for you, is to completely identify yourself with your own identity, creating your own identity. Make sense, Terry?
Yes, I agree. It's been very challenging on many levels, and
Yeah.
at the same time, I understand that it's necessary for you to see what it is that you need to do,
Right.
and for that, I'm thankful. And
Wonderful.
it has given me the opportunity physically to, because I can't at the moment, I'm having physical challenge that are dissolving away little by little, and I have been given the confidence, accepted it, and started my own book that I wanted to finish for many years, and now it's going to be published in October.
Beautiful.
And it will be a way for me to make money for myself again, and also a way to help people, which is what I feel called to do on some level while I'm here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're moving in the right direction, and the and accepting your responsibility is critical here. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Amen. Thank you.
See, even if we accept our responsibilities, the new responsibility, it gives a lot of energy to us. It feels good. It feels good when I start to say, okay, this is my responsibility. It feels good, especially the new responsibility. If it is aligned with our soul, if it is aligned with our mind and body, then the taking up the responsibility is a very, very empowering thing. Very good.
Totally agree.
Awesome, Terry. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.